to me, Joel, I think if there were a leadership training and every company had what made sense for them, but went over this stuff and then sort of implemented these in a simple but intelligent way and help their managers sort of have checklists and operate against these principles, man, I think that would really, really lend itself to way higher productivity in these companies in the bottom line.
Welcome to another Tell Me More podcast where we really dig into leadership and connecting and how we can be great leaders so that our employees and the people that we're working with can thrive and overall our organization can thrive. So today we have a really special guest with us that I know you're going to be excited to hear from. Jess Lane is with us, and Jess has 20 years marketing and business leadership across Fortune 500 technology, lifestyle, and financial brands such as Porsche, Michelob Ultra, Olay, Jim Beam brands, Miller Brewing Company, Visa, Discover, and more. So pull out your Visa card and get ready to get a drink. And then she led tech companies to IPO and unicorn status, which is billion-dollar valuation. And beyond her corporate career and tech tracker record, she has coached and consulted across multiple industries, always with a focus on aligning with purpose, people, and performance, aligning strategy with those things. Now, in 2024, Jess went to pursue a master's in psychology at Pepperdine University. And she wanted to really develop her commitment to human-centered leadership and success. In 2025, she launched the Full Cup Company to fulfill a long-held mission to make the future of work happier, healthier, and more purpose-driven. And that is my purpose as well. So there couldn't be a better fit. So great having you on, Jess, and tell us a little bit about the Full Cup company and what you're doing, and just give us the whatever you like.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all, and for the kind and warm introduction. I think I just pick up where you left off, which is really how I got here, and what I'm doing is a direct reflection of a huge life experience that I had in the midst of the journey that you mentioned. And when you said in 2024, I went back to school to get my master's in psychology. Well, right before that, I had actually been let go in a mass reduction from that same company that I had helped reach unicorn status. Really quite the blow. And, you and I have had some prior discussion around, understandably as humans, how tied our identities are to our work. Some of those awesome brands that you had mentioned that I'd worked for forever, that was a huge part of my entire identity. And as a marketer, for decades, I had looked at macro trends to try to inform how to grow brands or develop products, new segments, things like that. And when I started to do that on behalf of myself, I realized, I had got let go with 150 other talented people. And this was in late 2022. And now we fast forward and that layoff trend has just exponentialized. And so I could see that. The marketer and me could see where the trends were going with the layoffs. So when I was applying my analytical skills on my behalf instead of my company's behalf, I started to realize I wanted to bet on me because the jobs weren't like they were before. And so it had been a dream of mine professionally and personally to go back to school and get my master's in psychology. And I did that. When I did that, there was a very important mindset that I took into that, which was it was a yes and. I wasn't going to throw away that first half of my career. That was over 20 years of brilliant work, learnings, knowledge that I had then built almost into my own knowledge set in IP, right? That I was then applying in smaller environments. So when I said yes to those different experiences along the way, what I learned is how to do it over and over again in different environments. So finally, I realized I can do this myself because I had done it so many times. I had proven to myself. But that was an important mindset shift, and it required me regaining my own confidence and my own identity back from some of the things that I thought it belonged to. So I knew that when I went back to school that I was going to build something that was a combination of the two. And then lo and behold, a year later, I kind of applied all of my magic and founded my company, which is what I think all of us have is our unique magic based on our backgrounds, experiences, skills, education, interests, impact in the world. And I think the long story short is I'd seen a problem that existed in the world because I had experienced it so painfully. And I thought, why isn't there a solution for people that are experiencing this? We can't just go back to the 9 to 5 job boards. That isn't a thing anymore. We have to take matters into our own hands. And I had developed products for other companies and launched products and brands for other companies. So I just decided to do it for myself. And I was like, this would be really fun to help other people do too. And I think it's a need in the market. So that's how I ended up here.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you're helping people determine a career path, right? And where they should go, what their skills, interests, unique talents are, and helping them thrive.
Yes, wonderfully said. And when I was noodling with language and sort of category and where am I sitting and what's the value prop, if you will, I net out on a really simple idea that I really like that I sort of think is this new category and new option that we have, which is career design. It's a more proactive purposeful approach to work, taking very clinical research, decades of research, proven processes. And I like my approach. Of course, I do. I'm biased, but because I think we need both. I think we need the intrinsic motivators and we need sort of that unique value proposition that only we bring to the world. We also need that commercial savviness to launch it and position it and make it profitable in the world. And I didn't see anything quite like that in the world. And so I thought, well, I think I can build something that answers what I was looking for.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And you've got a lot of leadership experience, along with the now psychology masters to help kind of help us look deeper into how leadership works and how people make decisions and respond. And what we know, all the data tells us, is that when people are fulfilled at work, when they can say, man, I love my job, I love what I do, they're bringing so much more value to the organization than the people who are miserable, which, by the way, statistics tell us are most of them that are
Very
miserable.
high percentages, very low engagement across the board in the workplace right now.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's killing us profit wise. I can't remember how many trillion dollars it's estimated that a lack of engagement costs just U.S. companies, and that's killing your profits, your productivity, your creativity, etc. And then it's making people miserable, and they take that home. They take it home to their families. They take it to
It
society.
permeates all areas of life. Absolutely.
We spend most of our time at work. So I love that. And talk a little bit because you were let go, laid off, but you were doing a tremendous job and have been a key player in helping this company grow. And then to be let go was such a shock and such a personal blow. And that's one experience, but the other experiences that other employees have every day is being ignored, being not valued. Uh, they come up with ideas that nobody, number one, a lot of times even listens to begin with. You got the insecure leader who is afraid that you're going to look better than them, and you tell them the idea, and they say, "Oh, it's a terrible idea." Next month, you go to the company meeting, and they're touting this new idea that they came up with that was yours, right? And this stuff happens all the time. So tell us a little bit about how you felt and what things we can do to create better cultures in our organizations.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reality is a majority of people still do work a 9 to 5, right? And we know that's evolving. But the reality is a lot of people, if you're not laid off and you haven't had that experience, to your point, you are likely stuck in some environment that maybe you're not fully engaged in. And that's just the data, right? And so you and I both, I think, we have a bias for action and we have a bias for rooting ourselves in research and data and frameworks. And so one of the things that I think we both got really jazzed about was this idea of, I don't think a lot of people know what we're sitting on in terms of some of the systemic data that we have. So for instance, the World Health Organization and the US Surgeon General both have workplace well-being guidelines and guidelines for how to create and sustain an engaged culture at work and create well-being and mental health and psychological safety in the workplace. So let's just use 5 quick bullet points and we can chat on them. For example, from the US Surgeon General's framework. So the first is safety and security. Okay. So does my manager have my back? By the way, we love data. So we know that the majority of an employee's engagement and performance is directly related to that
Yeah.
direct manager
Gallup says
relationship.
70% of employees.
The data is unanimous across most every study on this. So that direct manager relationship, if we were to take a big step back, we were to say, like, what's the number one thing we should be doing as leaders? We should be training those managers on what we're going to just go talk about right now. And I bet if you just did that, you would see an amazing increase in productivity, of course, follow through and customizing for the organization. So let's just say that we gave managers the US Surgeon General training. Let's just say we created a little training out of that. So you talk about how the teams need safety and security. Does my manager have my back? Do we have a sense of belonging?
Can we stop on that one for a sec?
We can pause on any bullet. That's bullet number 1. So let's pause.
One thing that probably most people watching this podcast haven't heard is psychological safety. I talk a lot about how, thousands of years ago, our brains were wired until modern times for safety. So our decision-making processes are geared towards quick decisions because we need to, if, you're walking through the woods 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, you've got to identify this person walking towards me, friend or foe, right? Do I need to run? Do I need to pull out my sword? I need safety. We have walled cities and castles because the neighboring village might decide they want your crap one day and come raid you and kill everybody and take your stuff.
Our
right?
brains still work that way, by the way, right?
That's
Is
right.
where I know you're going. Exactly.
Yeah. And so without workplace psychological you said the words, does my manager have my back? Tell us a little bit about when we have that safe zone in our mind, what does that do for us? And when we don't, what does that do? How do those contrast?
Well, first of all, there's this idea of employee engagement, which I think is really important. And we also know that because we spend over 30% of our time at work, employee well-being is directly related to overall human well-being, just because that's the numbers. We're there a lot. And our environments affect us.
We could probably pull a bunch of stats on how stress affects our physical bodies, right?
90% of an employee's well-being is affected by the workplace culture, organization, leadership, right? Systems, processes. Only 10% is really directed by the employee themselves. So it's really to say the reason why the safety and security is so important is because the employee can't create that for themselves. They're really not as responsible for all of the things above them, right? They can't control the full environment. So we as leaders have to be able to give them that. If you think about going back to our nervous systems and how we're wired as humans, we're wired to direct threat. So our brain is constantly running. And if it feels like it has to protect itself, it's going to spend more energy doing that than it is working on your business, which is why you should actually care as a leader. Yes, to be a good human, but also for your bottom line, because you're going to get more literal brain energy out of that human if you remove the threat. They are going to be calmer. They're going to give you more, all of the things that we do when we're calm and we have room to thrive, right? So that is a reason, and that's what that looks like. But that's actually like the physiological reason why, directly related to productivity.
Yeah, no, that's good stuff. Good stuff. So Let's give a takeaway right here. If you want the most of your employees, stop thinking that fear and authority and looking for what they're doing wrong is a good strategy, because it's a stupid strategy. If I'm just being honest, it's the worst strategy in the world, because your people are spending all their energy trying to not get in trouble, trying to figure out how to work within whatever the system you've created is, rather than just being able to go at it. And then, by the way, tell you the truth about what's going on when you do ask. Because right now, most leaders get half truths or no truth at all. People tell them what they want to hear because they're afraid of telling the truth. So create that psychological safety in your organization, and you'll see things changing immediately. All right.
I'd bet on it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, go to point two.
Okay. Point two is support and belonging. I think this is related to number one, but support and belonging is, a lot of times, have you ever heard the term, I'm sure you have, servant leadership?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we
Absolutely.
have the psychological safety, which is a certain set of things that we do. Support is more active, isn't it? It's this idea of how are we breaking down barriers? If we have a happy and thriving team, what a reflection on you as a leader.
That's right.
Come on, right? Versus a team operating in fear, discombobulated. We're not communicating because we're afraid. We don't ask the questions that we know that we need to ask. We don't say the things, we don't tell the truths that we need to. Maybe we're hiding. Maybe, now there's surprises because we were scared. So it creates this discombobulation versus, do we have the support? So support can mean everything from, do I know my job? Has my manager informed me what they expect of me? This is very simple, but you would be very surprised.
Very, very surprised, because not only does data tell us that, but I've interviewed hundreds of employees and managers and different people, and you can't believe how many times you hear, I'm not really even sure what winning looks like. I'm not even sure what my exact role is. And you can ask, well, did you get a job description? Yeah, I got a job description, but we don't really go by that. One day I'm supposed to focus on this, and then one day I'm supposed to focus on
And
that.
how do I operate within the environment, right? Like, again, like we have to remember that this is a systemic situation. And oftentimes we look at this as such an employee individual thing. It's like we are operating in a system because we are all here mapping towards the same goal. So we are a unit. So as leaders, we are in charge of how that unit operates, not condemning the one person who can't get with the program, because I guarantee you it's not just the one person. So, it's really, to me, it's really interesting. And then, we kind of go to this sort of related concept of belonging. And that can mean a lot of different things, but it is very related to what we're discussing, which is, what is my impact? What is my role within the larger system? That is the leader's role to orchestrate that, right? And again, to remove those barriers, but also we need to be able to set that vision. The other area where I think belonging comes into play at like a very daily level for certain teams is, how do I work with other departments? And that's where leaders, in terms of belonging, it's my job as a senior leader at a company to help how my department and my team functions and orchestrates with other teams. And we as leaders should be cross-functionally mapping that out, because I guarantee you that's going to remove, again, a lot of the barriers. How do we all belong? How do we all belong? What are each of our roles in the system?
I can't help but think, we're filming this, by the way. All these are filmed and then they get put out later. But we're literally filming this, 2 days after Easter 2026. And on Easter 2026, what a story. We had a pilot down in Iraq that had to run to the mountains. You talk about, do they have my back? They sent a freaking boatload of people at their own risk to pick this dude up. So psychological safety, sense of belonging. How well do you feel like you belong when everybody risked their life to come get you. And then
Mhm.
you just said another one, how the departments and stuff work together. This was like Marines, Navy, Air Force, all these different groups working together to go get this dude off this mountain. I mean, it's really incredible. And think about his dedication. I mean, it was obviously strong before, but think about how pumped he and the rest of those people, and probably anybody in the military, are about the pride and, we helped our own, and now their willingness to go behind enemy lines because they know, hey, the whole dang military has my back. If
Mm.
they're going to
Mhm.
get me and help me, right? Man, if we can recreate that in our businesses, whew, you talk about the energy going up to a whole nother level,
That's
and
an
people.
epic example of best in class, how best in class teams operate, because they're all badass, but there's not an ego in sight because it's on behalf of the greater good. And I think that as leaders, let's say I also have been guilty of this in my life. Okay, human. Yes. So it's not shameful. It's just saying uh we get good at something. We are human. Our ego gets involved. We wouldn't be in a leadership position if we weren't good. So I think sometimes we forget that that's like inherent. If you are put in charge of leading a team, you're probably decent at what you do and you're probably pretty darn good, and you wouldn't be leading brands like I led. Yeah. So it becomes less about that. And then you realize the real wins are when you start to make things happen on behalf of the greater good, which is exactly what you're talking about. And that is how the most epic, badass, best in class teams operate. And we should absolutely be taking a cue from them. And they absolutely hit that number 2 of support and belonging. And that's at the top of their list. You can't do it alone, is the point.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
But
Man,
it's these basic things that we forget in this, sort of craziness that we live in now. But it's these very, very simple components.
we get so, uh, you know, driven on, you know, top line or bottom line or whatever, or we got to get this goal. And we end up doing all the things that are counterproductive to hitting the goal. We
Yeah,
put
we're
everybody under
swirling.
pressure, we run around and then we take shortcuts, even if we're the kind of person that normally wants input and, hey, let's get some input and talk about these decisions. A lot of times we get the pressure and then we shortcut that. And now we start giving orders and directives. And here's what we're doing. Now we're making poor decisions because we didn't get input from people. And now that goal that we're trying so hard to reach just gets farther and farther away because to get that goal, we need energy, and we're just crushing the energy of our people. And we think we're getting more because we demand you get this report to me. And now we got people working 10, 12 hours a day and on the weekends, but they're freaking miserable and they're not getting nearly as much accomplished. And there's also studies for that as well that show people are actually more productive in a 30-hour work week than they are a 40-hour work
Well,
week.
it's focused. And again, you know your priorities and you know what's important. You can't be doing everything. And so it just goes back to, do people know their roles? What are we out to learn? What are we out to do? And I think keeping it more simple, and oftentimes we overcomplicate. I really do. The more streamlined an organization can be in terms of mapping cross functional goals, like what are the things we need to do? We took a little bit of at the financial technology company I worked at, we did map that process. And at first it was a little painful, but after we did it once and we kind of simplified and streamlined it, it was like, okay, rock on. Now we know how each department is contributing to what we need to get done as a company. Now I know as a team lead what we need to go and get done. That's my responsibility. We'll go break that down. Got it. We're going to report back though on what my team needed to go and do, but it all kind of funneled. And it sounds a little perfectionist, but I think you can roughly do it. You can always take the best in class frameworks and adapt it for what makes sense. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you do need to, again, kind of going back to that support piece. Like, to me, that's probably the most critical piece of it, is that proactive support. What am I doing? And that's more important than ever in terms of now AI, right?
That's all right. Yeah.
How am I doing it? What am I doing? What's my role now?
That's
how am
right.
I doing it? So,
Yeah. And
right.
and I think leadership just becomes so much more important in the day of AI when we need to really help our people feel valued. And then we have, remote work and all sorts of things that require better skills to help people feel that belonging and let them know they're a part and they're valued and their significance and all of those things. So, which is again exactly what you're doing. And there may be people watching today who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of people that are entrepreneurs, right? And in the franchising industry, that's what we're helping people do. So everything that Jess is talking about today applies to if you're at a franchisor dealing with the franchisees, they're entrepreneurs. You need to help them feel the same way about psychological safety, belonging, right? All of those things. And if you're certainly a franchisee, this is what good for you, but you need to replicate this in your teams, right? So
Yeah, these apply to all work environments, Rory, and all ways of dealing with people. Okay, so number 3 is autonomy and flexibility. So, we talked about this idea of knowing what my job is. Well, if you give me a job description or you tell me, Jess, these are your top 3 priorities, how Jess goes about it versus how Joel goes about it would probably look very different, right? And neither would be wrong. It would just be our own way. And we would probably both deliver pretty well because we're both pretty smart. So, how much autonomy do I have to go and do my job? How much flexibility do I have within that? If I have to deal with other departments or entities, have those relationships been unlocked for me in certain areas so I can go do my job freely? Do I have, the tools I need, to go and do that? And so I think the freedom within a framework, like, okay, cool. I know what I have to do. If there are certain expectations of me in terms of how I do that, great. Otherwise, let me go figure it out.
yeah, and I think this really applies to franchising a lot because in franchising, well, we have a system for everything, right? But you can get so rigid on, well, you've got to follow the system, but hey, wait a minute. Is people have their style and they may have a way that helps us. They can work in that framework. That framework can't become a legal system. Like you have to do it exactly this way.
But just take all the joy and strip all the autonomy, and the creativity for sure. And, Joel, there's a lot of research. There's a decades-long research study that I actually used that in my research class. I studied, but I wove it into the theory and kind of the principle of my program. But I think it's relevant for your audience as well, because it goes with this autonomy piece, which is there's a study called the self-determination theory. It's a decades-long research study done by 2 PhD professors, and it talks a lot about how autonomy and meaning and connectedness is and mastery. So are we good at it? We're probably going to lean towards something we're good at, right? But also this meaning and this autonomy piece are the keys to sustainable and successful work. Meaning, if we feel intrinsically like we have autonomy, like that we have some meaning, then that is going to take us way further than, say, chasing some sort of title or something that just doesn't mean anything to us, right? So I think that's where autonomy becomes really critical to me, and this idea of meaning, because it's so rooted in research and it's so directly tied to our sustainability and our long-term success in terms of like what we go and do and creating meaning from our lives.
Yeah. No, that is incredible. Just touching the heart of being human, right? Um,
Human-centered leadership, because especially again, what do we need in the age of AI?
yeah.
It's a yes and, right? We need to learn AI.
Yeah.
We
That's
also need human thinking and human-centered leadership and judgment and experience, cognition, the brain cells firing, right? We need all that recognition, that human recognition and that human intuition more than ever. So exercising our autonomy
right. Yeah.
and being flexible are both and adaptable are both more important than ever,
That's right. Yeah.
no matter
No,
what you do it, because
that's
everything's changing.
and back to all the other things. Now you're going to get your the best work. from somebody. All right. Now they've got the
I think
autonomy,
so.
use their inherent skills to get her done. And again, frameworks are great. They just can't become laws. I always say every rule is made to be broken. Every law is made to be broken. And my big, example is there's a sign on the fence that says no trespassing, but there's a kid on the other side that's about to be gored by a bull. Okay, jump over the freaking fence and save the kid. Man,
Use
don't
some human
know. I
intuition.
can't do that
It's like
because
the
there's
episode
no
of The
laws.
Office. It's like the
No.
episode of The Office. Did you ever see where Michael drives the car into the lake because the GPS is like, go forward. He's like, we're in the lake. And we're like, why would you drive into the lake? Like, what are you doing? So, I think it's that human judgment for sure. And those are extreme examples. But so that was number 3. Do you want me to go on to number 4?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so number 4, and this is really interesting just against the humanity that we're talking about, which is dignity and meaning.
Okay.
The highlights I would give here would be dignity. So, respecting the human as an individual. So one example I have is I'm fairly type A, just oldest child, just how the cookie crumbled. That's cool. I have had people on my team before that are not at all, that have worked for me, that are kind of like, I have one of my favorite people that ever worked for me was like kind of just a little hippie chick and like just a little, definitely not type A. My boss at the time was type A and she was like, what is with so-and-so? And I was like, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that because just because she doesn't operate exactly like us doesn't mean she's not getting her work done. She's actually a little whippersnapper. It comes across a little different. How was I to approach growing this individual into someone who could flourish at the company, but then also sort of have her own style? That required making sure she had dignity. And we weren't trying to make her into someone that she wasn't. We were just giving her some tools to grow wherever, more professionally where it made sense. So I think there's that. And then the meaning piece, I think, is probably one of the biggest things across work, like we were talking about, because it goes back to that decades of research, which is a couple things. Do I know what I'm doing here? Do I know the meaning that I have in this company, my role, the system? Right. And
does that go
then
with like significance, like wanting to feel like
mattering?
Like I matter to the company.
Yeah. And as a manager, there are very specific performance related things that you can do at the individual level to help manage. And then there are also the less tangible, but very important things, right? Mattering. So again, giving someone dignity, giving someone the respect of the one-to-one, however frequent you all decide on that. Doing the proactive supporting. So, it's not to say that these things are all separate. I think they're definitely, but they're individual components. But the one thing I wanted to mention about meaning is that there are a lot of very interesting career psychology theories. So within the larger field of psychology, which I didn't know existed before I started school. One of them is called the career construction theory. And all it really means is that our individual experiences in work and jobs have micro narratives for us. So for instance, when I was at the financial technology company and I helped them reach $1 billion unicorn status, that was a micro narrative. Ooh, and then I got laid off, and that was actually another mini micro narrative within that. So I had 2 in that, Porsche was a different narrative, micro narrative for me. I helped bring in women and new audiences to that. So you get the point. Just different journeys and chapters. What career construction theory does, and if we were to do that technique, we would create a macro narrative. Out of all of those different experiences, we would kind of start to string together some key themes, and we would ask some specific questions, which I won't get into, but that's a different macro layer of meaning as you grow in your career and you're kind of trying to figure out, what's next. As a manager, though, you can help people with both. You can understand where they want to go bigger picture, and you can help them understand what they need to do in this role, and you can still give them some opportunities that help lead them to that bigger goal or kind of where they want to go, or, oh, okay, yes, this is your day job and you have to do these things. Here's a little project that I think would be super cool for you that probably benefits the company, but probably also will give you even more autonomy or more meaning in your role, but also more macro level. So it has a lot of different meaning, can take a lot of different shapes.
Yeah. And then that ups that engagement. It ups that. And I love working for this person, right? Which
Is another layer of
defines
meaning.
engagement, right? Because man, this person's looking out for me. They actually care about me as a human. I'm not just some tool for them to reach some economic
And it's
goal.
benefiting the company. I've done a lot of that work where some of the pro bono isn't the right term because I was getting paid, but extra projects, that I pitched at work or that I was like, hey, yeah, I kind of like this idea. Like, I would sort of ask or whatever, was some of my favorite work because it was some of the freest thinking I could do. And that created more meaning for me. And it was cool for my boss. More ideas, smarter team, just more is more in that case, and I was super engaged. And so nonetheless, and then this last one, Joel, is learning and accomplishment. Again, I think very much tied into a lot of what we've been talking about, but I suppose maybe two quick highlights there would be learning. So relative to also some of like that flexibility that we were talking about and just kind of constant learning, especially in the age of AI. How are we doing our jobs? How are we facilitating learning for, our teams? And it doesn't just need to be learning against AI. That's just a very relevant example. I think also having learning plans for your teams.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, a plethora. That could be hands-on learning. It could be mentorship in a different department. It could be actual courses. It could be third party. I mean, just such a variety. And then accomplishment, I think, is important to touch on because, what is I think really, really important just to overall engagement and performance. What's a stretch win for someone? What's a logical win for someone? It doesn't always have to mean getting promoted. You don't need to promise promotions to everyone. You should be realistic about promotions. Your goal should be to get that person as good as you can get them. So what we say is it's always a partnership because we want to get them promoted. How do we get you as badass in front of the organization as you can be? So it's no question the next time I put you up. So it's a partnership to get that person promoted. But in the meantime, what are the accomplishments that they need to get to and how can you support them to get them where they want to go? That's cool, and that's going to build all the other things that we talked about too.
Oh, absolutely. And because everybody loves to win. I don't know, but it's always when I was a kid, we used to say it's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. But I was never on a loser team where I really felt very good about it. We
Well,
may have
yeah.
played with integrity and character and all those
We're
things.
human,
Crap,
I do
yeah,
love the how. I do believe the how we do things, because like a lot of us are, like we were saying, we have all these smart people and it's like, so we know the what. Like most of us would be like, yeah, this is what we need to do. And it's where we just get discombobulated in the how, which is a lot of what we're talking about. It's like, how do we lead these teams? And so, to me, Joel, I think like, I don't, if there were a leadership training and every company had what made sense for them, but went over this stuff and then sort of implemented these in a simple but intelligent way and help their managers sort of have checklists and operate against these principles, man, I think that would really, really lend itself to way higher productivity in these companies in the bottom line.
yeah. Well, they say for I think it's seven times return on every dollar spent on leadership ultimately equals $7 return. So, and there is a program, by the way, called Tell Me More Leadership Training, and it doesn't go by those exact 5 rules, but I promise you, it accomplishes all 5 of those things without using the exact 5 steps. And it is a systematic approach to leadership. And you can check out my website, joelworthington.com, and find out more about that. If you're thinking at all about doing something different or a career change, then now you've been introduced to Miss Jess Lane and her company, Full Cup. Is it just the Full Cup Company, right?
Full Cup Co. Yeah, that's great.
Full Cup Co. And check her out, and you can find her website. What's the name of your website?
Fullcupco.com. And you can follow Jess Lane on LinkedIn and message me there if that's easier for you.
Fantastic. Well, if you didn't get any takeaways from today, you don't have a pulse. So great.
That's the biggest compliment you could give. Thanks, Joel.
Jess, you did a great job. Thank you for being with us. And we really appreciate it. Wish you all the best in your company. And certainly we'll stay in touch. And everybody, you stay in touch as well, because we're going to have another great podcast next time and give you some more great takeaways to help your organization thrive and help your people thrive, which is key to helping your organization thrive. And as Jess said earlier, just being a good human. So thank you for being with us, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks so much.